Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. So this is Toninator from Team Liquid here with some questions for me. I'll I'll let you take it away, I guess.
All right. Well, actually, I know you started off with a Zerg discussion, but I actually wanted to talk to you. I don't know if you read my small rant about the protoss or anything. Did you read that already?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Um, well, basically, I I've huge respect for what you're doing and all that good stuff, but I was yelling at you because it actually. I know you said it bothered me, or it bothered you. You wouldn't know that it bothered me. It bothered you that, a lot of aliens are basically humans. They're hominiform, but with a couple changes. And my rant was basically saying, well, there's this thing, for those of you watching, I'm sure you know this, called convergent evolution, where two different unrelated species can end up looking similar. I don't know if I gave this example, but the good example is a bat and a bird both developed wings, even though they're like nowhere. Right, they're not related at all. So my theory was that the early protoss pre Xel'naga could have fulfilled a similar function to early humans. They could have been running kind of tribal animals, and I'm using the word a lot. I'm gonna actually find my post because it was a lot more.
Yeah, while you're looking for your post there, I'll point out that with convergence, and there's actually better examples than birds and bats. There's the horny toad and the thorny devil from Australia. Both of them even eat the same food source, which is ants, which is really uncommon.
Oh, interesting. I didn't
Um,
know that. Okay.
yeah, they look really really similar. There's a few other ones that are pretty damn close. Basically, the whole concept is that I struggle with is once you start down the path of convergence, it's a lot of coincidence and things like that. But for two different planets with presumably similar pressures, um, they start when they were, I guess, in their sort of early stages. We're talking well before the sort of primate-looking stages here.
Hmm.
Um, they would have to go through some very similar and probably very improbable steps in order to get there. So, for example, they would need to develop bones. They would need to they would need to have cephalization. So they would need to have a head. They would need to have four limbs. So that would mean the head on top of a, a pectoral girdle on top of a pelvic girdle, and so forth. So you end up with just an absolute ton. Like this is well beyond like birds and bats, for example. They were already in the whole sort of vertebrate um, loop, I guess, and we're making a lot of assumptions to say that there's a huge direct correlation between I guess convergence and what's going on with the protoss and humans. More likely, it's just lazy design because game designers pretty much only take human anatomy, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, yeah, so like, and this is common throughout all of the aliens and stuff like that. A lot of times they're done that way also so that people can relate to them. So that, like, you get the two eyes in the middle, like right in the same position where ours would be, so that you can see what they're looking at and stuff like that. It would be an extreme coincidence for any life in the universe to look that similar to humans. I mean, obviously there could be a case for things like bones or something similar, and it really does depend on a lot of discrete things, like a lot of specific ancestry also converging on it and being successful. So, I mean, if you change one thing in the history of human evolution, you're going to change the way we look.
Yeah.
So, so that's the problem that I have with it. Though you're right, there is a lot of convergence. The other option could be that maybe the Xel'naga potentially had something to do with human evolution in this universe, and being that they're narcissistic, i.e., they said that the protoss were purity of form. Well, what the hell decides purity of form? That's stupid, unless you have some baseline like, okay, well, we're going to make them look like us and guide their evolution in that way, and then you end up with the potential that maybe humans were tweaked with by the Xel'naga as well. So,
actually, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know how much you know about lore, but I'm a total nerd, right? I played Warcraft 3, learned all that lore. I've learned all this lore, too, as much as I can, anyway. And it actually says that, the cyclical life cycle of Xel'naga, the Xel'naga would have purity of form and purity of essence, so it kind of makes sense that Xel'naga would have kind of molded the protoss after themselves. Mm-hmm. And the reason for the events of the first Starcraft game is that, like the protoss, humans had started to develop psionics. So I think that's actually very interesting that possibly the Xel'naga intervened in human evolution as well, which, in that case, if you have an outside source interfering, that would make a lot of sense as to why we look similar.
That's pretty much the only reasonable explanation.
Yeah, other than extreme coincidence.
And we're talking extreme coincidence.
Yeah.
I mean, just the odds that you'd end up with something that has a head with 4 limbs in the same orientation is kind of a stretch in my opinion. Then again, I mean, obviously we haven't found any alien life yet. And if we do, it's probably going to be bacteria first, and unless we score some really lucky, I don't know, stuff on the moon of Titan.
Yeah. Well, we haven't gotten very far as distance goes. But if you think about it, I know it's a very small chance, but the whole point of this is saying this might happen possibly in applying science, I think. So, but if you think about how many planets are out there, right? We don't know where Ire would be in relation to Earth.
Yeah.
It could be, 10,000 light years, which is farther than we've been by a lot. I don't know by how many times, but right. So that's like the main argument I've heard for life outside of Earth is that there are just so many planets. It's essentially infinite. So even if there's a very, very tiny chance, odds are there's at least a couple others. So you could apply.
Well, you can break it down sort of like in a lottery system. So let's give it some rather modest odds. 1 in quadrillion chances that chemical evolution, which does naturally happen, will turn into some sort of life. Basically, on Earth, there's several different hypotheses for where it could have formed. Shallow tropical water is a really good place. Apparently cold Arctic water is pretty good too. There's a lot of oxygen there. Mm-hmm. That's why you get things like the giant isopods growing so giant.
Yeah.
And then and that's why they're also really productive and why whales go up there and feed on krill. Just there's so much free oxygen because oxygen dissolves easier in colder water. And then there's the idea of the hydrothermal vents as well, which while they're ephemeral, they're also extremely productive while they're around. So there's 3 potential areas. So given any one of these, on any planet that has a large body of water, for example, you're going to get probably billions of trials to form things like amino acids, proteinoid microspheres, things like this, every second. So if you're getting, say, billions of trials, trillions of trials even, per second, and you multiply the amount of Earth-like planets, say there's, well, like you said, there could be, infinite almost. We don't know that. You're almost guaranteed to hit the most remote odds multiple times. So it's kind of like, entering the lottery is as much as you can, and eventually, if you have enough money and enough trials, you're eventually going to win, despite the odds. So, given enough trials, it does become an inevitability that there would be life. What that looks like could be anyone's guess.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of a big step to go from prokaryote to eukaryote. Then multicellularity is something that is rather. It makes a lot of sense, especially if you look at things like sponges. Um, they can survive on their own a lot of times, the cells, but they just don't. And once you get multicellularity, well, then specialization happens and all those good things. So it's one of those things where once you get life, it's almost inevitably going to start eventually becoming more advanced. So, and whether or not that's like a direct mimic of what we see on Earth, or if it's something that, you know, we have. Well, I find it difficult to try to imagine life as we don't know it because I don't have any baseline for it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what's kind of frustrating. And I've always kind of wondered why the protoss, why they didn't start messing with various genetics of animals on Ire. I mean, given that they've got the technology, obviously, if they can put a crippled body into an immortal or dragoon,
yeah,
and keep it alive that way, especially if they're photosynthetic, like how the hell are you going to get light inside of the immortal?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think it's not. I don't think they're photosynthetic. I think what it is they feed off of radiation, like certain species of fungi. I think makes more sense to me.
I don't think that there's any species of fungi that feed on radiation. I could ask Az. I think she's on right now.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm fairly sure in Chernobyl, like 4-ish years ago, probably that was found.
I think it was more of a case where they were thriving in the presence.
Maybe despite. Yeah, I'll look it up.
Yeah, because I can't see anything using radiation as a food source, and I think that the protoss actually were explicitly stated as being photosynthetic at one point.
Were they? I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. But it would also make sense for them to be chemosynthetic as well.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at, say, like a hydrothermal vent, pretty much the only thing that feeds directly off of the fluid coming out of the water is bacteria that get to be about the size of a grape in some cases, which is pretty huge.
Yeah.
They actually fix sulfur from the water and feed off of it that way.
Interesting.
And then they make huge bacterial mats and things like that. And then you get a succession of animals that come in. So you get like the first sort of things to come would probably be the pogonopherans, so the tube worms, Pompeii worms or whatever you want to call them.
Okay.
They use broadcast spawning, so they often will be sort of widespread. Then you get things like the less mobile, like crabs. It's funny to think of a sedentary animal that's stuck to the whatever substrate as being more mobile than a crab, but
yeah,
the larvae get out there. They really spread far and wide. And then you get, you know, one thing eating another and another and another. So as the community develops, you actually end up with, anyway. So it could be that the protoss derived from chemosynthetic bacteria or photosynthetic. It's just really difficult because you're not getting as much protein in that way unless they're actively snagging amino acids from the water.
Well, all right. So I looked it up, and I don't know how much of this is sort of sensationalism, but it does appear that the Chernobyl stuff actually does eat radiation. It doesn't just live in the presence of it. It actually feeds off of it.
Huh.
So, but yeah, if it said they were photosynthetic, then that pretty much settles that. Yep.
It would have to be the. Okay, I'm looking at the article right now. You're right. Yeah. It would have to be the right kind of radiation. There is so many different types of radioactive decay and things like that. It would have to be the right kind, and I'm by no means a radiation expert.
Oh yeah, neither am I.
I just know that there's multiple types, so it would probably have to be the right kind, and they might not find it palatable.
That's true. The other thing is I remember, as far as lore goes, early Protoss actually did have mouths. So their whole being chemosynthetic or photosynthetic was probably engineered by the Xel'naga at some point.
Huh.
So it might not necessarily, trying to think of how to say this, adhere to the usual rules of like how did this become the most efficient method. You mentioned that they didn't get very much protein.
Yeah.
So maybe they could skip that somehow. I don't
Well,
know how that would work.
Here's the thing. As far as I know, we don't know what the Xel'naga look like, but Dark Voice might be one. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I haven't followed it that closely. Anyway, it might be a case that it's not the most efficient, because if you're striving for purity of form, you're not necessarily, especially if you're going by your own standards of, okay, well, life should look like this, you're not necessarily going for the most efficient or efficacious. So basically, what the Xel'naga might have actually done is, in their attempts to enhance psionics and make them look more whatever purity means to them, they may have actually hampered the ability for, like, say, reproduction, which is probably why the Protoss are going extinct now.
Interesting.
Apparently, because they, that and they were hammered by the Zerg so hard.
Yeah.
But they obviously don't possess the ability to reproduce in mass quantities.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point, that it might have been the product of the Xel'naga messing with them, because I know the Xel'naga gave the Protoss a big Caterin crystal that helped with their reproduction rate because it's so slow normally. So I think that's pretty interesting that it might be that.
Yeah, they seem to be really strongly linked to this Kydarian energy, which is probably some sort of electromagnetism. And then the void, whatever the hell that is, I have literally no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just magic as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, the Protoss, I suspect, will see some more of their biology and legacy of the void. It's just really difficult because we don't have that baseline of what the Xel'naga actually are. So if we had like a picture of one, or we knew how they behaved or anything like that, we could make assertions to, okay, well, this is why they did what they did to the Protoss.
Yeah, that would...
Because clearly their sense of ethics, especially bioethics, is far different from our own concept of, well, you shouldn't torture an animal, or, although it's not that far off. I mean, if you think about turning a wolf into a bulldog, and bulldogs are so messed up now that you pretty much have to give them C-sections or they can't give birth.
Yeah.
And that's all selective breeding. It's the exact same thing as the Xel'naga would have done. Well, they might have done it a little bit more aggressively, but
yeah,
it would take us thousands of years.
I think we can assume, in the case of the Zerg, they did it far more aggressively. So I noticed that we're kind of reaching the time that these normally go. So if you want to go soon, that's fine. But I do have one more question for you.
Yes.
Is in researching this, what has been your most interesting find? I know you hate the Hydralisk jaw.
Yes.
I've read many posts about how much you hate it, but other than that the Hydralisk jaw is stupid, what is the most interesting thing that you found?
Well, certainly I like the idea of the roach having a lot of issues with the regen. Just the fact that they would be more prone to different cancers and stuff, and various diseases. That was kind of interesting to me because that sort of is counter to the idea of Zerg potentially living forever, as is in the lore. I've been looking at the Baneling a lot, and when compared with things like the honeypot ant, as well as there's a type of ant that does suicide bombing using acid.
Yeah, I saw the link to that someone posted.
Yeah, that was Brutaxelos, I believe. He pointed that out to me. I didn't know that. That was pretty cool. It just strikes me as the more I make comparisons to ants with the Zerg, the more it really does fit. Like, it really works really well.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of makes sense. They even have, they have queens and, well, one queen now, but So the structures, I mean, everyone called them space bugs, right?
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, a lot of them aren't actually insectoid, and the queen in the Zerg sense is completely different. The queen, in the sense of like an ant, is basically a slave. She's force-fed, and her sole purpose is to throw down as many eggs as possible.
Yeah.
So she's got a really bad, like, it would suck to be the queen, to be quite honest. It would be horrible.
No. Well, don't you think it'd suck to be a queen normally? I mean, if you look at a StarCraft match, what do? They just larva vomit for like 25 minutes. And
Yeah, they kind of do that, yeah.
And sometimes just get killed, right? That's like the job of a queen.
They also have more, they're more mobile, actually, believe it or not. And they actually have more control directly over the hive. So they do have more power than a queen in the ant sense.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that queens actually mattered at all as far in StarCraft 2. I know and ants, they're the only ones that can lay eggs, which is pretty important, but yeah. Anyway,
All right. Yeah, that was actually a really good question. I'll have to think about that one a little bit more. But we're at about 20 minutes now, so it takes a long time to upload anything more than 20 minutes. So
all right.
I'm going to cut you off here.
Yeah.
But thanks for your questions. It was a pretty neat discussion about the Xel'naga, and an interesting perspective came from it as well. So
Yeah.
productive.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on the show now, I guess it's a show. So
yeah,
cool.
now this part is going to be a regular thing, viewer talk, I guess.
Cool.
So okay, well, I'll talk to you later.
All right, I'll talk to you later. Thanks.